one of the things I think is very important about bursary recipient testimonials and testimonials from donors as well, actually, is the fact that it helps build internal awareness of the power of philanthropy. And of course, we've always got that at the back of our minds, that we're teaching our current pupils about what they might want to get involved with when they leave. So I think there's an interesting side to that as well.
Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator, specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. So this time I'm delighted to be welcoming Sam Davies to join us on the podcast, and we are going to be talking about harnessing the power of testimonials. Now, most of what we're talking about is specifically going to be relevant to fundraisers, but actually testimonials can be used in a whole variety of ways within independent schools, from pupil recruitment through to venue hire and staff recruitment even as well. So Sam Davies' first foray into fundraising came when she was in her final year at Warwick University, and she was a caller in one of their first ever telephone campaigns back in 1997. So following graduation, obviously Sam took the bait and really got involved in educational fundraising, and she led telephone campaigns at 22 different institutions across the university and school sector as a consultant over 2 years. She then returned to Warwick University to run their fundraising campaigns, and later became responsible for all of their other annual giving activities as well. In 2008, Sam took on the challenge of establishing a sustainable fundraising and alumni engagement operation from scratch for the University of Brighton. And during her time there, her team won a national award for fundraising progress, an international award for alumni relations engagement, and also built up her alumni community from just 20,000 initially to 150,000 members globally. In 2015, Sam was awarded the Case Crystal Apple Award for Teaching Excellence, in recognition of her outstanding performance as a sector volunteer, as a speaker and a tutor. Sam is now the head of philanthropy at the Girls' Day School Trust, the GDST, and this is the UK's leading group of independent girls' schools. And within that role, she's leading on achieving a major step change in bursaries fundraising. So she took up that role in April 2019, and it was personally significant for her because, coming full circle, Sam herself received a full bursary award to attend Portsmouth High School, one of the schools within the GDST family, from the age of 11 to 18. So it was understanding that experience of transformative philanthropy that initially gave her the idea of a career in educational fundraising. So it's fantastic that Sam's career has come full circle and brought her back to achieving transformative change within the GDST. Really quickly, before we dive into the detail, I want to make sure that you make the most of the time you invest listening to this podcast. And the best way to do that is to make sure you grab a copy of my free ebook, The Strategic Independent School Leader. It outlines how to answer the 6 essential questions that will clarify your school strategy and secure its future. In the world of business, strategy can be full of jargon, but it doesn't have to be that way. This is a jargon-free tool tailor-made to help private school leaders think and act more strategically. Download your free copy today at www.consultjuliette.co.uk/ebook. So let's dive into the conversation that Sam and I had around testimonials and harnessing their power for schools. So welcome, Sam. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Fantastic. So this week we are going to be talking about using testimonials and why testimonials work, why they're important, both from a fundraising point of view and from the point of view of other ways that schools can use testimonials in their work. And Sam has extensive experience in the fundraising world. So that's where we're going to start and focus our conversation. And Sam, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you use testimonials specifically from recipients in the fundraising work that you do for the GDST.
Yes, really, really happy to. And I think it's quite an interesting topic, and there's quite a lot of different perspectives on using testimonials, especially from current bursary recipients. And it's something that I've discussed at length with colleagues here at the GDST, because on the one hand, there's that sense of not wanting to make an example of or add a stigma to the situation of a bursary recipient. And I completely understand that. And I feel as though, there may be some cases where that is absolutely the right thing to do, and there could be many reasons for that. But then on the other hand, it's those children, those young people who are receiving the bursaries, who are the best placed people to explain the impact of them, which we need so desperately when it comes to encouraging people to support our work. So I've been sort of playing the long game here at GDST in that regard. I've been here for just over 2 years. And to begin with, there was very much a no, we don't ask current recipients to give us testimonials. We just don't do that. Or if we do, it's anonymous. We don't use their photos. We don't use their names. And it was very much a closed door. And I think the more I've spoken to colleagues, both at our trust office and our individual schools, they've really understood the reasons why these are so powerful. And we are doing a good job now of getting some great testimonials. And I think it all comes down to being sensitive, to not putting pressure on these young people, in our case, girls, and also involving their families, which I think is quite a key aspect to it. So we try and make it as easy as possible. We provide a set of questions. Um, and then we ask the girls and their families to answer these questions and weave them together into a narrative, and then share that with them. They approve, and we go from there. And we know, because we have the data that shows it, that they are some of the pages on our website that are most frequently visited. They're the ones when we send out a publication to donors and we share various articles. It's the young girl who's just started at Croydon High School on a bursary. It's her story that people want to read first. So it's obvious that that is what the donors and potential donors want to read and want to hear.
And it's fantastic to know, obviously, we know it is best practice, and you can see anecdotal evidence when you talk to donors about the fact that those testimonies, those personal stories have really touched their hearts, and that's why they want to donate and give. But at the same time, it's really useful to know that there's quantitative data that you can collect as well to show that actually this is really of interest to people, and really answering those questions that donors have about why they should want to give and what impact it's going to have on the individuals they're helping.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when I first joined the GDST, having been a bursary recipient at one of our schools myself, I knew that even from when I was a young girl, 11 years old, at Portsmouth High School, I would have been more than happy to say thank you and to tell my story, because I was so proud of the fact that I had achieved what I'd achieved. But then there was this sense that I didn't really know the impact of my bursary until much, much later. So we've also done quite a lot of work with alumni who received bursaries to ask them to reflect back. And those testimonials have been perhaps not as effective, but still effective to, to encouraging people to consider the impact of bursaries, because these bursaries do stay with people for the rest of their lives. So I think having a mixture between the immediate and the current and the reflection going back is really important. And something you said just now about capturing the hearts, and we've got to remember that our donors, some of them will be very rational people who want data and who want facts and who want, black and white, in terms of data. And then there will be the ones that are much more compelled by emotion, and they want to hear the stories, and they want to see the faces, and they want to feel the story
Yeah.
rather than just understand the facts. So having both of those opportunities in terms of the stories that we tell and the information that we share, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about storytelling. Most of what we do as fundraisers is
Yes,
about storytelling. So, but having the story come directly from the voice of the recipient is so incredibly powerful. And you mentioned their photos and any images, so photos or video testimonials, anything like that, where you really get a more personal connection to the individual whose voice you're listening to or reading. Again, just multiplies the impact, the personal kind of emotional impact that you get from those words, doesn't it?
absolutely. So our recent, we did a GDST wide donor publication last December called Giving, GDST Giving, and we featured stories on the impact of philanthropy across all 25 of our schools. And we didn't have the budget to do videos. I mean, we could have done, homemade, DIY on your phone videos. But what we did do was we asked everybody that wrote a testimonial, shared a story, to do an audio recording of it. And we had those on our website and with QR codes. And again, it really did make a difference. So what was printed word and word on the page came to life. And that really, and like you say, it's that sense of hearing. It's the authenticity. It's somebody's voice. It's a real, true story. And I think we want to do much more of that going forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea of using audio. Obviously, we're doing a podcast, so we're
Mm.
using audio only here. There's a lot of research which shows actually that in some circumstances, the video, the visual side of things can distract from the message. And actually, audio is
Oh,
a
that's
really
interesting.
powerful way to use, to communicate, to use. And I suppose if there are schools that still have concerns over anonymity and so on for the
Mm.
pupils, then actually, if you're using an audio, okay, you could still potentially identify the person who's speaking, but there's that sense that, okay, this is a slightly more anonymous way of doing it. So that's an interesting kind of middle ground, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So do you give your bursary recipients the choice to be named in the testimonial that they give and to be
Yes.
identified in their
Yes.
testimonial? And how many people take that opportunity up?
Well, we're sadly not yet at a kind of a full process on this, but what we're hoping to do, what I'd like to see happen, in fact, is as a girl joins the GDST, one of our schools, on a bursary at age 11, in most cases, or at sixth form, that they at that moment are given basically the chance to say, yes, I'm happy to do a number of things. And one of them will be to write a thank you letter, which will be pretty straightforward. And actually, what we've been saying is that we would like the sort of recorded testimonials or interviews or a bit more kind of involvement as they're a bit older, rather than at the age of 11 necessarily, because we appreciate that that's potentially quite daunting. But at the age of 11, we'd love them to just simply write a thank you letter, because that is, it's as we all know, manners. And when we've all got Christmas presents, we all have to write thank you letters afterwards. So just get that sense of educating our girls about the power of philanthropy at that stage as well. And I actually, if we can come back to one of the things I think is very important about bursary recipient testimonials and testimonials from donors as well, actually, is the fact that it helps build internal awareness of the power of philanthropy. And of course, we've always got that at the back of our minds, that we're teaching our current pupils about what they might want to get involved with when they leave. So I think there's an interesting side to that as well. But moving forwards from the younger pupils, as they become older and more certain of how they feel and things like that, then we would like to obviously involve them more. And it is our intention to sort of introduce essentially a framework of bursary recipient engagement. And it sounds quite formal when you say it like that. And actually, I feel that that's the right thing for it to be, because we want these girls to realise how special and what an achievement they've made in securing a bursary award. They should be encouraged to feel great pride in that. And so if we have a special programme of engagement, which we also hope will involve some mentoring between older bursary recipients and younger bursary recipients, and possibly recent alumni leavers who receive bursaries, and perhaps the sixth form bursary recipients, to kind of really give that sense of that this is a very exclusive group of alumni and students who are the creme de la creme in terms of their academic achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that immediately brings into my mind is that if we make the assumption that bursary recipients don't want to be named because of the stigma that might be attached to them as bursary recipients, that begs really serious questions about whether or not your school has a really strong culture of inclusion. Because
Absolutely.
if you are saying that, okay, obviously they have the choice, they have the right to select whether or not they are identified. I think that's very important. But at the same time, if you are saying that there is a stigma attached, then actually I think there might be some work to do on that bedrock, that foundation of a culture of inclusion, and the way that bursary recipients are really included in the school. So I think it's really interesting to hear as you move through, as the girls move through their time at the GDST, that they're then invited to actually have the opportunity to say more publicly the impact that it's had, and that they get something back from that as well. There is a give and take, a reciprocity to that, because they're getting some of that mentoring and that sense of being part of a really important sub-community within your schools that are bursary recipients and proud to be that.
Absolutely. And, of course, the GDST at the moment has really put a great focus on diversity and inclusion. We've recently launched our Undivided initiative, and part of that is around ensuring that everybody in our schools, whether they're staff, students, governors, whoever they might be, anyone associated with our schools, has a true sense of belonging. And I think, recognizing different parts of our communities is vital to that. And diverse communities are successful communities. So it's important for our classrooms to be as cosmopolitan as possible. It's not just about ticking boxes for a public benefit exercise. It's absolutely about social mobility, and it's about achieve greater success for everybody involved. So and I think I think the stigma thing is really is a really interesting one. And we've had some examples relatively recently of alumni probably leaving our schools in the mid-90s, that sort of era. Things were very different. Things were very different then. Bursary recipients weren't made to feel very welcome, and in some of our schools. And that isn't universal by any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't my experience, for sure, at Portsmouth High School. But and we want to demonstrate that is so far away now from the truth of what happens in our schools, and that every girl is welcome. So I think we have some work to do, but I think we're certainly on the right track. And I think there's just perhaps a little bit of culture hanging around, which sort of that sort of sense of assuming that a girl might be embarrassed to be on a bursary, or assuming that her family would be embarrassed they're receiving a fully funded award. I just don't think that's the case in huge numbers. I don't think that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right. And just as often with alumni relations, there is this kind of reputational lag, isn't there, between the way that the school was when those alumni were actually pupils and the way that things have changed. And so some of those assumptions that we maybe make about the fact that we wouldn't want to place a bursary recipient in a public setting, the assumptions behind that actually are a little outdated. And so giving choice, I think the choice is fundamental, but giving that choice to those bursary recipients to come forward in a slightly more public way is it's well worth considering. And I do know from speaking to many schools, it is something that a lot of schools still feel uncomfortable about and are still finding their way and finding the way that's going to work in their school community. So it's important to have the conversation and recognise that, as you mentioned earlier on, this can be a work of progress over a number of years rather than a sudden shift in approach. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, Sam, which I think is really important, I just want to dwell on for a few extra seconds, is the fact that you mentioned having a system. So you mentioned that you ask them questions, that you have a process in place for when you ask those questions and at what stage different people are asked to do different things for you. what does that system look like? Are you still developing that? Have you evolved over
Yes. Yeah.
time, or
No. It sounds far more concrete when you describe it like that than it actually is. Um, but it's in my head at least, which is always good. But
be
I
a good
think
system start in our head? Yes.
exactly, and obviously this goes alongside very neatly with the GDST's plans for significantly increasing our bursary provision over the coming years. But I think a system that means that, because I think what I don't want is for different things to happen in different schools. I don't want some girls to feel as though they're getting something that other girls aren't. And I think that just actually by making a sort of a process that all the schools follow, and that all the schools understand and appreciate the reasonings why we do things at different stages. I think it just means that we don't miss anyone. And also, it's really helpful from the donor stewardship perspective, especially with those donors like trusts and foundations who are very particular about the timings of impact reports and everything associated with that. So I think it would be a really useful way, and also with 25 schools and with 1,000 students, over 1,000 students receiving some kind of financial bursary support, having a system just means that we can keep track of everything pretty easily, and we can create templates. Because I think the other thing is, that helps with these girls and their families is not being sure about what they should say. What
Yes.
shall I say? What should I say? And again, not, I might be guilty of stereotyping now, but for some of these families, the world that they're entering into is a very new world, and so we may be asking them to do things that they've never had to do before, and so they just don't want to do the wrong thing. They want to do the right thing, and they want to be helpful. So having frameworks in place and templates in available, I think, would just make life easier and reduce the kind of scariness of what they're being asked to do.
Yeah. And I think it can also, you're still using their words, but it helps them to the
Yes.
testimonials to have so much more
Yeah.
impact, because
Absolutely.
otherwise you get potentially quite bland, it's changed my life and that's it. Well, yeah, it has changed your life. That's fantastic. But
Totally.
could you tell us about a moment where it really made a difference to you? Or could you, what would you say to donors if you were face to face with them? How would you kind of express the difference it's made? And these questions just prompt something a lot more
Absolutely.
profound than,
And one of the questions we asked is, what would you say to someone who was thinking about giving in support of a bursary? So
fantastic.
not what would you say to the people that made yours possible, but what would you say to someone who was thinking about it? And I think that's quite, and of course, at the end of the day, I'm a GDST girl, so I'm bound to say this, but it's true. These girls are bright girls. They have a lot of thoughts. They're bright girls. They're talented girls. They're clever girls, and so they have really great things to say. And because I'm looking at it as a fundraiser, I am also looking at it as a donor, and I'm looking at it as a bursary recipient, an alumna myself. But they're living it right at this moment, and so their perception, their take on things is just so special, and you can't manufacture that. And I think
Yeah.
that's the real beauty of it. So like you say, I want to capture the uniqueness and the authenticity, but make it as easy as possible for them to share that. So the questions we've kind of come up with, we've now got about 10 or 12 questions that really do seem to bring out the very best in the responses.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's giving that structure. And one of the reasons, even if you don't have a set of 25 schools that you're looking after, but even if you're in a much smaller school community, having that system means that it's gonna
Yeah,
happen on a regular basis. This isn't just the thing you do
sure.
2 weeks before you're publishing a new brochure. You need to scurry around to find another testimonial. This is something that needs to be an ongoing process, because the more you can collect over time, and the more you can put them out there, the more impact it has. This isn't just about collecting one or two in a one-shot process. This is about a regular approach that you're taking.
Yeah, and we were just having a conversation earlier today actually about our next. We're doing an donor publication, like an e-zine for our donors,
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking to my colleagues about actually, what we want to start doing is not just bursary testimonials, but examples of our bursary girls doing great things. So,
Yes.
whether that be a charity fundraiser, or whether they've won a prize or come top in a sports competition, or whatever it might be, that it just shows that that beyond, it's not just them getting the award, it's what they do with it. It's how they're living their experience, how they're making the very most out of every opportunity. And I think that that really, as a donor, I hope that makes people feel like, wow, we've not just, we got this, we helped get this girl into the school, and now look what she's doing. It's that kind of, just adds to it. I think
It's another
that's
way
really
of
great.
telling that story, isn't it? Again, it comes back to that storytelling and using, it's almost like a case study, like you might see in a more general sales and marketing kind of setting, a case study of exactly what impact this has had on those particular people. Then the narrative that you can create around that can be really, really strong. You've mentioned actually donor testimonials as well. So do you collect testimonials from other people? So donors or teachers, parents, and so on?
Yeah, so we absolutely donors, and we always try and have a range of donors. So we in our last printed publication for donors, we had an alumni donor. We had who was giving a £10 a month, relatively sort of participation gift. Then we had parent donors. We had someone who from a trust and foundation, a family trust, and then we had a larger charitable trust, and we had a corporate, because I want to, we had that range of voices, so that no matter what sort of donor you are, or you might want to be, or might be able to be, there's someone there that perhaps resonates with you. So I think, and again, we give them some questions, and we say, why did you do this, and what prompted you to, and and again, a set of questions that we have honed over time to make sure that they get good answers. As a member of staff, a current member of staff who's giving, we asked her to provide a testimonial. So we're covering all the bases there.
Yeah.
We also ask where parents are happy to, the parents of bursary recipients. So I've just I've just been introduced to a girl who will be joining one of our schools in September, and her award, her full bursary, is being funded by a long-standing donor to the GDST. And I had a Zoom call with the girl and her mother a month or so ago, and it was delightful, absolutely delightful. They are so proud. The girl is like so excited. She's going to this school. Her mum was just brimming with pride and wanted to tell everybody. I mean, she'd probably walk around with a sandwich board on if we asked her to at the moment. She was absolutely thrilled, and she said, anything you want us to do, to help spread the word about what you're doing, we'll do it. We'll absolutely do it. And I think you just can't, like I say, you can't manufacture that. And I
Yeah,
and
that's why
I
we do the job, isn't it? To hear these
it
stories
is,
and to see the transformation that it's actually happening
yeah,
to real people and the difference that it's making to people. It's incredible.
yeah. And I think, going back to what you said about case studies for sort of commercial organisations, I mean, I think what's really interesting is that you go on a website for a venue, and it says, our venue can cater to this many people, and we have all this magic AV equipment, and Wi-Fi available, and all of these things, and it's all very true, and it's very exciting. But when you read the story from the person who used it for their event, and it went swimmingly, and it just, you kind of, both of those pieces of information together suddenly just set it off. And
Yeah.
storytelling is so vital, and it's just that voice, like you say, it's hearing that voice and thinking, that's what I want to feel, or that's what I want to see happen.
Yes,
And yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's really
And
important.
in the wider, I mean, obviously, a lot of fundraising best practice is rooted in sales and marketing best practice and then adapted for the purpose. So, in the sales and marketing arena, a lot of what people talk about with testimonials is overcoming objections and talking about
Yeah,
how whatever it is that you're selling has overcome those pain points that your kind of ideal client feels. So adapting that into a school setting, obviously, as you say, it's really interesting. A lot of schools are doing venue hire for meetings or events or summer schools or whatever it might be that you're doing.
yeah,
So ensuring that testimonials are actually used across the school and obviously in pupil recruitment as well. But overcoming those objections can be really, really useful for donor testimonials, but also for if you're using it more widely for venue hire or for pupil recruitment and so on within your school. And what you can do there is identify what are the main objections that donors might have.
Yeah.
I'm only giving, I could only give £10 a month. That's not going to make any difference whatsoever, so I won't bother. So if you can get your testimonial to address that, and not specifically to plant the idea in people's minds if it wasn't there already, but to say, have a donor say, unfortunately, I can only give £10 a month, but it's still, I can see that it's making such a difference. So whatever those objections are that you're hearing when you're talking to potential donors, when you're kind of in your events, when you're talking to the people that you're trying to inspire to take action that you want them to take, finding a way to make your testimonials address those objections is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the only sort of concern I have sometimes about that is that it could almost, like you say, you've got to be careful not to plant that idea, so that but I think there are very good ways. And actually, taking the testimonial idea one step further would be something like this, like a conversation, like a conversation between a donor and a fundraiser, or a bursary recipient and an alumna. Actually sort of it coming up in conversation could be the way to address that. But I think that one of the things that we are very much at pains to highlight is that bursary awards is not just about the fees, it's about the incidental costs, it's about the lunches, the travel, the uniform, the music lessons, the sports equipment, the cost of trips. There's little point in a girl being given a full fee award if actually then her family are having to struggle to get her the other things that are needed for her to make the very most of it. So by highlighting when bursary recipients are able to take advantage of everything else the school offers is another way of just demonstrating that that we see this as a full award, a full.
Yes.
It's not just about paying the fees; it's about making sure the girl has access to everything that is out there. So that's certainly something that we would very much. And the participation argument, I mean, we've all been there. Regardless of which educational institution you're raising money for, the participation argument is one of the hardest, because people feel as though £10 a month is just a drop in the ocean. So any way in which that can be smashed through is important. But yeah, I think addressing objections through storytelling, I think is a really great way of dealing with that problem.
Yeah, definitely. And it has to be authentic. It has to not feel like you've engineered an opportunity to do that, because otherwise you lose the power. The power of the testimonial is its authenticity, and that direct voice that you're using, and harnessing the power of that direct voice in getting that story across. So we're going to wrap up now, Sam, and I would love to hear, do you have any top tips for school fundraisers or other people within schools who are looking to start on this journey and kind of up their game a little bit with regards to the testimonials? What would be the top tip that you'd give them?
Well, I think, because there is this issue of schools feeling that it's going to be a sensitive issue, and people are going to get upset, and we've never shared people's names before. I think if you can identify a family, if you can sort of go in through the side door almost, and find an example of what it is you're trying to do, I think that's if you can, rather than pushing the school too hard or pushing your colleagues too hard to go down that route, let's find a girl, blah blah blah, if you can actually demonstrate and show some examples from elsewhere and how it's worked and how those people have felt, I think that's going to be make things a lot easier for you. And sometimes it's just, I think, it's just down to us us as a society not wanting to talk about things like this. Sometimes people get a bit nervous about it, don't want to make anyone feel embarrassed, and actually that's not how people feel, I think, in a lot of cases. So that would definitely be my top tip, just trying to demonstrate that it works, and rather than sort of pushing or pulling people to somewhere they don't want to be.
Absolutely, and take it step by step as well.
Doing
absolutely. kind of anonymous through using a voice recording or anonymous in some way that's kind of a halfway house is a great step forward. So keep moving in the direction of harnessing those testimonials and the power of those testimonials and getting them out there to your various different audiences. It's been delightful to spend this time with you, Sam. Thank you very much for your wisdom and your insights.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone who's listening. I will see you again next week. And thank you again for listening to the Independent School Podcast. Bye-bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.